Utah broadcast. My name is Katie Matheson. I'm the communications director here at Alliance for a Better Utah. And today we are talking about a very big topic that has been in the news a lot. We're talking about immigration and what's going on right now nationally, and in particular at our southern borders. With us, of course, we have Lauren Simpson, who is our policy fellow. And we have Aaron Tarin here with us, who is a professor of law at the University of Utah and also an immigration lawyer himself. Thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
All right. So before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, remember to click Get Reminder when you see a scheduled post going up, a scheduled video going up from us, so that Facebook will remind you that we're going live. Every Wednesday at 12:30, we're going to be here talking with movers and shakers in Utah. And in particular today, we want to share with you a call to action. Comunidades Unidas, it has put together a call to action asking people to call their representatives and ask them to vote no on the Border Security and Immigration Reform Act and also Securing America's Future Act. Right now, we don't quite know, except for Representative Bishop, who has said he will support the Securing America's Future Act. We don't know who is supporting what in terms of comprehensive legislation to fix the broken immigration system as it stands. So before we get started, I want have to guess. So neither of them have seen these headlines, and they have to guess whether or not they're real or fake. All right, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, first one. I'm going to turn my computer so nobody can cheat. Man sues ex-girlfriend for sabotaging music career so he wouldn't move away. True or real or fake?
That sounds like a case I just had.
I think that's real too.
Yes, good job. You got it. The lawyers are outsmarting me already. Okay. Next one. Goldman Sachs board members announce plan to make cryptocurrency the new standard. Real or fake?
I think that's real, or something similar to that.
Lauren?
I hope that's fake, so I'll say fake.
As of this moment, it is fake. But you never know.
Interesting. Okay.
Bo's so excited over there. Bo's the one who wrote these fake ones. He's like, yes. All right. Next one. Heroic goat finds missing girl in Oklahoma after she was gone for over 48 hours.
A heroic goat. Boy, I guess that one's fake.
It's so hard.
I also think it's fake, but if it's real, I will cry.
It is fake.
Okay.
Goats are jerks. Everybody knows it. Woman gets head stuck in exhaust pipe.
Boy, a car exhaust pipe? That sounds real to me. I don't know. It's real.
I'm going to say that one's fake too.
It's real. Minnesota woman had a memorable time at a music festival this past weekend by getting her head stuck in an exhaust pipe. All right, two more. Angry peacock attacks ice cream vendor at a zoo in Philadelphia.
That could be real. I think that's real.
Yeah, that sounds true to me.
It is fake, but it could totally be real. And the last one. Achilles, the psychic cat, correctly predicts winner of the first World Cup game.
Psychic cat. Oh, that's a tough one. These are trick questions, all of them.
I believe it.
I'm going to defer and believe it as well. I guess that's real.
It is real, according to this.
If the internet says.
But here, you got to listen to this. But the feline has a long way to go before he can be declared top dog among clairvoyant animals. So I want to go work at the Huffington Post now because they get to write those. All right. Now back to actual real life. Let's talk about immigration and what's going on at our border. So as it stands, I first want to say, what are we at? 12:34 on Wednesday, the 20th, Refugee Day. This is the news as we understand it to be right now, and things are changing really fast, so who knows what's going to happen. As it stands, I think about 6 weeks ago, there was a directive to have zero tolerance policy, right? And what this has resulted in, I'll let you guys get into the depths of what exactly that means, but what this has resulted in is over 2,000 children being taken from their parents and detained. So that's kind of the information that we're working with.
2,000 that we know of.
That we know of. Okay, so Professor Tarin, is that what I can call you?
Just call me Aaron.
Aaron?
Yeah.
Can you give us, before we really dig into that, can you give us just some of your background, your history with, what you're doing, stuff like that?
Sure. So I got into immigration because my parents were actually immigrants. And, from a young age, I was able to see kind of everything that immigrants go through. So I did law school here at the U. And now, I teach a course at the U. I also have a law firm named Immigrant Defenders. I try to stay pretty involved in the immigrant community on the board at the ACLU and at Communities United. And been doing this for about 10 years now, and still feeling like it's a losing uphill battle, right? But yeah, that's a little bit of background on me.
Great. So let's talk about the specifics of what's going on at the border. Do either of you guys want to give us some details about what's going on and the rhetoric that has been incredibly confusing and just swirling this issue as it stands?
Sure. Do you want me to just start a little bit? So yeah, like you said, about 6 weeks ago, essentially what they started to do, the federal government under the direction of Jeff Sessions, began essentially prosecuting everyone that was coming in, quote unquote, illegally. And this is, the initial entry, if you come in illegally, is essentially a misdemeanor. But it can cause a tremendous amount of delay, because when you prosecute somebody for a crime, you can't just throw them into one of these kangaroo courts, these administrative courts. You have to actually take them to the federal district court in the area where they're trying to enter the country illegally. And of course, these courts are limited in terms of their resources. And so what happens is you create a large backlog. There's a lot of federal judges that aren't happy with Jeff Sessions, cramming their courts with these petty misdemeanor offenses, right? But the reason they're doing it is precisely so that they can separate the parents from the children by using this as an excuse, saying we've got a criminal on our hands, and so you deserve to be separated from your child. And the rhetoric he's using to try to kind of spin this is he's trying to say that the Democrats actually did this, that they. And in reality, what he's referring to is a case that was decided many years back that essentially said, look, you can only detain a child for up to 20 days and then they have to be released. And so now the Trump administration is essentially saying, well, this isn't our fault, right? We have to, separate the parents from the children, and kind of trying to use that as kind of some legal cover to be able to essentially accomplish the primary objective of this, and that is to instill fear in people. Regardless of how desperate these people are in their home countries, the fear of having a child taken away from you is something that is just horrendous. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, that's essentially what is going on right now. And we're just starting now to see kind of the impact of what this is causing in terms of, the kids in the cages and everything that's happening there.
So why don't you walk us through what's the alternative to this? Instead of prosecuting every case of improper entry into the U.S. as a criminal misdemeanor, what was done in the past? What should we be doing now?
Well, one alternative would be to actually let people walk in and ask to come in legally, right? I mean, what we're seeing now is many people, they come to the border seeking, valid asylum, and ICE is employing all sorts of stall tactics to, for example, I've had clients who've been literally stuck on the bridge, waiting for days, some of them weeks, just to try to come in and knock on the door and say, here I am, I want to do this legally, right? And so what people do then is they get desperate, after all, you are in the desert, it's like 150 degrees, and so what happens? Well, people then go through the back door. And this is something that's been reoccurring now for decades, right? If we don't provide a valid way for somebody to come and knock on the door and say, hey, I want to do this right, then can we expect anything else except for them to come in illegally? So I think that that's, the primary solution to this. And we've been talking about this, fix our laws, fix them.
Right. And as far as asylum goes, so the immigration code is really convoluted and confusing, but essentially what happens is it's not possible to plead asylum into the U.S. unless you are physically present in the U.S. So that requires you have to be physically present in order to plead asylum, which either means going through a point of entry like the bridge you described, or if you cross, illegally, if you just walk across the border into the U.S., you are still able to plead asylum. The law doesn't make a distinction.
As long as you do it within 1 year.
Right.
As long as you can hire a lawyer and do it within 1 year. Because
Right.
as you said, asylum law is complicated. And most people simply can't navigate this. And many people can't even come up with a fraction of what it would cost to get a lawyer to do this within a year. So unfortunately, a lot of people just lose their opportunity. Those that come in undocumented.
Yeah, I just wanted to just review what you guys had just said, because I think that's an incredibly important point that people get lost up in, which is that people say, I support immigrants, but they should come here the legal way, right? And what you're saying is they are trying to do it the legal way, and it's become very, very difficult.
Almost impossible.
So you said, they're sitting there trying to do it, trying to get it done. They can't do it, and they're desperate because they're sitting here in these deserts, and so they're going about it another way, which is still... if you have to be here, so they still get into the country and then they plead asylum that way.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not just happening at the border. I have employers walk into my office on a weekly basis with a blank check saying, Aaron, it doesn't matter how much it costs. We'll do whatever it takes, to get my workforce legal. And I just tell them, I'm sorry. I'd like you to cut me a big fat check, but the laws are broken, so I can't help you. And they kind of just scratch their heads and, well, okay. And this is why we're in the situation we're in. It's not just at the border. It's the same applies to pretty much everyone else who's undocumented here in the country. They're clamoring to do this the right way. There just isn't a legal way to do it for the vast majority of people right now.
Yeah. So in your guys' experience speaking with people who have come here, what are some of the reasons you hear for people wanting to come here? We hear a lot of people talking about seeking asylum because of the terrors that they're experiencing in their homes. I don't want it to get explicit, but can you just give us kind of a summary of what you hear when you talk with people?
I think this is critical because people think that immigrants are invading our country for no reason, that they just want what we have. And that they don't, and that it's not our fault that they're poor and they're starving. But if you look around, a lot of the people that are coming here, look at their country conditions and why do those country conditions exist, right? Look at the Middle East, for example. Well, we blew up their country and caused civil war and caused all sorts of chaos. And of course, they want to flee. In Latin America, our policies ranging from everything from fiscal to weapons to guns to drugs, we blow up people's countries. We create all sorts of havoc around the world, and many of that just comes back into our face. And we want to pretend like, oh, it's not our fault. We're America. We have everything because we're good and you're bad. No, much of this is our fault. Morally, we have to acknowledge that, and most people don't understand. So, for example, right now Trump likes to trump up MS-13, the gang members, okay? Well, where did this gang start? On the streets of L.A., right? We pick these kids up, we deport them, they go back, and then they essentially just change positions in a criminal organization where instead of selling the drugs to the Americans who want to buy them at whatever price, they're manufacturing them or distributing them, right? And we train them in all of the tactics and everything else. These countries didn't used to have a gang problem until it came from us, right? And we're perpetuating it now, for example, with the DACA situation, where we preclude these kids, and I have many clients that I see here in West Valley and other places here in Utah, where the kid graduates from high school and he may be the valedictorian, but he doesn't have a work permit and he can't go to college. And the message he's hearing is that, look, you're not good for anything. You're not accepted here. And so what does he do? Well, he's got to do something, and they turn to the streets. And what happens in the streets? They get turned into gang members, right? They have to survive. They're looking for some way to incorporate into the society. And then we deport that kid. We train him on the gang tactics, and then we deport him back to the country. And those countries simply cannot deal with this criminal organization element, right?
Right.
The gangs in Mexico and cartels, gangs, call them whatever, they're funded by drug money that we send them. They have big guns that we manufacture and give it to them so that they can send us drugs, right? That's just one small example of why much of this is our fault, right? And people need to understand that we do have a moral obligation to these people that come dehydrated, knocking at our borders.
Right. And like Aaron said, back in the 80s, this was a problem. LA has gang violence, and that's a problem that they tried to outsource. And so they exported these gang members who originally, like, these people came here on bracero work programs, a lot of them. U.S. wanted cheap labor, so it provided a pathway for immigrants from other countries to come here. Then, when there wasn't a further way forward, those people get involved in gangs. The U.S., because we treat deportation like a punishment, like a criminal punishment, somebody will go to jail, they pick up habits and they join gangs in jail. Then we send them back to these countries that have no police infrastructure to be able to contain it. It's like you have a weed in your front yard and you're like, oh, I don't want this here. So you throw it into a pile of fertilizer in your neighbor's yard. And when that grows and comes back later, you're like, whoa, where did this all come from?
Then you yell at your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you clean up your yard?
Yeah. And I'm not trying to compare people to weeds. I'm just saying that systematically, the way that the U.S. treats detention, the way the U.S. treats criminal justice, the way we think about that system is fundamentally flawed. And until we change that, and until we stop deporting people for crimes, this is a problem that the U.S. is going to continue to experience.
Right.
And so because of that, the U.S., at least in response to the Central American refugee crisis that's been going on since 2014, and even earlier, we have a unique responsibility to accept these asylees. So any legislation that's being offered where it's like, okay, well, we'll stop separating children from parents, but we also need to stem the tide and admit fewer asylees, make it more difficult to get asylum status. We can't absolve ourselves of our moral responsibility to fix a problem that we started.
Exactly.
We have a couple of options now. So this is such a comprehensive and complicated and difficult conversation to have that Congress hasn't been able to fix for decades, right? Yeah. So the situation with the children, it looks like the situation with the children being taken from their parents and detained looks like it may be fixed through an executive order, hopefully. And besides the fact that it's simply remarkable that Trump waited 6 weeks and allowed children to be taken from their parents for 6 weeks on an issue that he could have fixed with a pen is incredibly, it's immoral. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But there's a couple of options for Congress. Congress could fix this situation. So I guess support, end separation of families with legislation, which Senator Feinstein has put forward. It's an 11-page bill that our understanding at this point, and I could be incorrect, but it's just to simply stop the separation of families. And then there's also this legislation that people are supporting. So there's the ones that we talked about at the beginning. So it's the Border Security and Immigration Reform Act, and then Securing America's Future Act. And these are attempting to fix comprehensive immigration or pass comprehensive immigration reform now that things have come to a head, right? And so I'm curious, what do you guys think? I mean, let's talk about what comprehensive immigration reform looks like. What should it look like? Fix be, I mean, how do we fix this? And go.
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, I would say initially, the problem that we're facing right now is parents and children being separated at the border. That's a triage situation, and it deserves a triage response. What it does not deserve is comprehensive immigration reform. Does that need to happen? Absolutely. Should it be part of the same legislation addressing this situation? No, because that's going to require more compromise. It's going to require more negotiation. It doesn't need a quick fix, but this situation does. So that's why the Keep Families Together Act is the best possible, the Feinstein bill is the best possible solution that we have on the table right now to this situation. I think all of the other legislation that's being offered by Republican lawmakers, it technically, it does try and keep families and children together at the border, but it does a whole bunch of other terrible things too. Like it calls for more family detention centers, which are super inhumane and unethical. I don't think they should exist at all. And it ties DACA funding to a border wall, and it holds dreamers hostage, and it limits the availability of asylum, and those measures, whether you're for or against them, are simply inappropriate to be discussing at this moment. Like, this legislation is not the time or place for those kinds of negotiations on more long-term problems.
Yeah. 5 years ago, I probably would have disagreed with you. There was a big push for comprehensive immigration reform. And you know what? I still think that...
And I think it should happen.
I think it should happen too. The political reality is that this issue is so toxic to everyone that you can't get anyone to do anything. And so, those of us that are quote unquote pro-immigration have been pushing for comprehensive immigration reform for years. And that would be great. It's an ideal, but the political reality is something else. And in the meantime, there's kids in cages at the border, right? So I agree. One of the reasons why immigration law is so complex is because it's this patchwork of spaghetti code. You add this, and then something else comes on top, and then something else goes on top. And, trying to teach this to law students is frustrating because it doesn't make any sense, and it's so complex. They say,
I didn't do well in that class.
Right? It's tough.
Hard.
Right? It's like writing spaghetti code, and you just almost want to scrap the whole thing and start from scratch. And anyone writing computer code would do this because it's just garbage. But once you realize the political realities of it, you understand why the law is the way it is. And so I, at this point, I do have to agree. We have to address the most urgent issues first. In one, we're just too partisan, and our entire legislature is just, they can barely basic things, right? Let alone something as complex as immigration. So yeah, let's fix that first. Those are the urgent issues. I really think that then we need to address asylum law. That needs a massive overhaul, where at this point it hasn't been updated for so long that you have Jeff Sessions essentially updating it unilaterally by, changing decades. It falls on the courts to kind of say, no, executive, you can't do this, which takes years and tons of litigation, and it creates a patchwork of law across the circuits. So, that needs to be addressed. If there's going to be a quote-unquote wall, it's not going to be a physical one. It shouldn't be a physical one. It should be an administrative one where there's doors and there's process so that people can, engage the system legally instead of, coming in through the back door. And then once we're done with that, then I think that we can start addressing some of the other issues, and it needs to be done quickly, right? Because internal, immigration is a big issue as well. Our economy is right now running on fumes in terms of labor. Unemployment is at its lowest it's been in who knows how long. Right. And it's going to start impacting our economy. It already is. The brain drain in Silicon Valley with the H-1B visas, right? Where you have Microsoft just packing up and moving to Canada, right? The American dream is moving to Canada and overseas. I mean, this needs to be fixed, right? But I'm starting to agree with your point of view more that trying to fix it all at the same time just may not be practical or feasible.
We have a question, and this is something that we had talked about prior to starting, but we have a request from Steve to discuss more in depth the impact of the Flores Agreement and kind of how it plays now.
Well, the Flores Agreement was tremendous. I mean, it prevented the government from keeping kids in detention for longer than 20 days, which, it was, I have many clients, children who they're traumatized, post-traumatic stress disorder, separation anxiety. It destroys these kids. And then when they come into our society, we wonder why these kids tend to have higher, instances of substance abuse or whatever it may be. Well, when you do this to a kid at the border, it's just terrible, right?
Right.
And now Trump is essentially using that agreement to just say, well, it's not my fault. The Dems got this case. And so, I'm just doing what I have to do. So the Flores Agreement it was great. And that wasn't the only aspect of it. I don't think we need to do away with it. I think we should codify it, right? And incorporate it, with the other aspects that are happening at the border.
Right. And all of the bills that I'm aware of, with the exception of the Feinstein bill, would essentially do away with the Flores settlement. There's explicit language in the moderate compromise bill. What's it called? The Border Security and Immigration Reform Act. Yeah. So there's explicit language in that bill that would override the Flores settlement.
Replace it.
Which means that children would be able to be detained indefinitely with their parents. Well, not with their parents because parents are separated. With their mother in immigration detention centers. The average length of stay in adult centers and, without the protection of the Flores settlement is 13 months. So
it's tremendous.
We would, if we put this fire out the wrong way, we're not going to be doing these kids any favors by holding them in jail for over a year.
Right.
I mean, that's insane.
That's correct.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to plug your op-ed that just came out today in the Deseret News. So Lauren had a op-ed published today, and she talks about her experience in the family detention center. And it has kind of a Father's Day angle. And, people, I think it was Chris Stewart who said, we need more family detention centers. That's the answer to this problem. And Lauren's argument in this piece is that it, in fact, is not. Families are separated. Fathers are taken from their children. And even older male relatives are taken from their. So even if you have like an older brother, he'll be separated from you. So the Flores Agreement, for people who have no understanding of what that is, that was a case that went to the Supreme Court, right? And then it was settled. Is that correct?
Right. There was a settlement that resulted.
Okay. And so I think I would like again to hit home for our followers that the separation of families is indeed terrible, but detainment of children in cages, even with their mother present for however many months, is also inhumane. And I mean,
Yeah.
So I'm actually not keep that. So is there anything else? We can wrap up now, but is there anything else you would like to say? What would you love to see happen in the next week? What would you love to see Congress do on this, if anything?
I think that, fixing the detention issue as soon as possible just needs to happen. I mean, we can't have kids in cages. That's urgent. And also, I think that the public needs to realize that we're responsible for this, and we need to create some legislative pressure here, right? I hope that people aren't just reading about this and, oh, this is sad, and I'm looking at Facebook and there's this kid in a cage and I'll feel bad, but then they swipe left and go back to their, suburban lifestyle. I hope that this resonates with people, and I hope that they remember when, the elections come up. because somebody needs to be held accountable. I hope that this finally hits a tone with people where they realize, oh my goodness, these are kids. These are real human beings, and we all have a responsibility to make this right.
I agree. Anything else from you, Lauren? Okay. So as we're ending, are there ways that people can find you or your organization? The ACLU.
So the ACLU, just Google ACLU. You'll find you can donate there. You can go to Communities United. They also have a website. There's several refugee organizations here in Utah. That's partially our fault as well in terms of advocates, is we don't have kind of a unified front where we can funnel the energy, the time, the money that people are now looking to contribute to the problem, but support, the nonprofit organizations that are sending lawyers to the border, that are filing the lawsuits, right? I mean, that's one critical thing that we can do. Pressure your legislators to act, let them know that you don't support this. And I guess lastly, just don't forget. Don't forget what's happening, right? Remember that this is happening, and this problem is not just going to go away. I hope that this isn't just a news cycle, right? Because it has been happening for a while. I'm glad people are finally acknowledging what's happening and talking about it. So yeah, don't forget.
Yeah. So you can follow us, followers, obviously on Facebook. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Better Utah. And again, I'm going to plug the action that Comunidades Unidas is doing today. Call your representative and ask them to vote no on the Border Security and Immigration Reform Act. And that's sponsored, I believe, by Speaker Ryan, and then Securing America's Future Act. What we suggest for is a simple fix to separating families, which would be Feinstein's bill. Of course, that's in the Senate. And then you can discuss further comprehensive immigration reform. So, and followers also, if you have any questions on these bills, if you have questions on immigration reform, please feel free to send us an email or a direct message and we'll respond. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, guys.